Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to SADS Live episode 111. It's great to get to be with you. I'm Mike Ackerman, genetic cardiologist here at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and director of Mayo Clinic's Winland Smith Rice Genetic Heart Rhythm Clinic and the Winland Smith Rice Sudden Death Genomics Laboratory. But as in the previous 110 episodes, I come to you here on behalf of the Sudden Arrhythmia Death Syndrome Foundation, the SADS Foundation, and our CEO, Alice Laura, and we give you greetings. I've had the privilege of serving as president of the board for quite some time, and it's really good to be with you. Happy Valentine's Day out there to everyone. And as you know, we are in Heart Month in the United States. February has been declared Heart Month, and we, along with American Heart Association and American College of Cardiology, and those other societies that are dedicated to our patients with heart disease, want to extend that welcome to Heart Month, participate in it, get involved, donate. www.sads.org. Top right corner has a red donate online button, easy to do. So go ahead and do that if you want to, and spread the word. And we obviously at the SADS Foundation want to spread the word about genetic heart diseases that may predispose to the possibility of sudden cardiac arrest or tragically sudden cardiac death. We participate in rapid response efforts, and we all have been aware, consciously aware of the need to have that chain of survival reviewed, tested, exercised, and so forth, with the incredibly wonderful case of survival of that Buffalo Bills player now over a month ago. In all communities everywhere, we're thankful and grateful for Damar's survival, but also gave a chance to wake up the country and say, what would be our community's readiness if somebody were to go down suddenly and it was a witness collapsed, a witness cardiac arrest? Would we know what to do? Would we be able to promptly activate the call, begin the compressions, push the button for the AED, the external defibrillator, and so forth? And I think there's definitely been awakening to try to make our communities sudden cardiac arrest safe, or to make it, as we say, very, very hard to die suddenly and unexpectedly where we live. And to help tell that story, it's just really exciting for me. I've been a big fan of Dr. Will Flannery's on Twitter, also known as Dr. Glaucomflecken. This will be his first visit to the SADS Live, his debut, but his wife is a seasoned veteran, Mrs. Kristen Flannery, also known as Lady Glaucomflecken, and she's returning to join us. But now they're joining us together as husband and wife. So without further ado, Aaron, if you could bring on the Glaucomfleckens. And here they are. Well, welcome to SADS Live. It's just great to have the two of you with us.
Well, thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
It's great to be here. It's great to be alive.
It sure is.
And thankful for the two of you. Will, as I was saying in the background, I love your memes or your shows or whatever you call what you do, with making fun of us in cardiology, and actually you spare no one.
I know, that's true. Yeah, I try to go after everyone equally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair and balanced.
That's right. I actually brought my my nephrologist water bottle. I hope you don't mind.
No, does it have a pinch of rock salt in it, or just straight up water?
Just no, it's just water, but it's just got me wearing my salt belt there. So
It's good to stay hydrated, because I don't want you to get lightheaded during our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, I know when I said it's great to be alive, for those who may not know Kristen or weren't here when we were last together, he's alive because of you. And you said, oh, wait a second, not exactly. I was just part of it. But no, I mean, you were the key link and the key reason. And some people may not know that what we're talking about is that your husband is a sudden cardiac arrest survivor because of you. And as we're in February Heart Month, could you sort of take us back? Because I have a feeling, Dr. Flannery, that you were essentially drifted from blissful sleeping to unconsciousness, and then a few days later you wake up and it's like, what actually happened here?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
So you don't have any, in the sense of in the moment, angst, anxiety, trauma, stress. You just drifted, and but you, Kristen, it was all you, and you were all there. So maybe bring us back to that moment and walk us through your story.
Yeah, so it was the night after Mother's Day in 2020. So it was really early in the COVID pandemic still. And at about 4:45 in the morning, he woke me up because he was making a lot of really loud noises. And I'm not medically trained in any way, so I didn't know what those noises were. I thought that he was just snoring at first because, I've just been woken from a deep sleep. But he wasn't responding when I tried to kind of readjust him to see if he would stop snoring. And then the sounds started sounding a little more kind of urgent and panicked as well. They didn't sound like anything I had heard before. And so later on, I learned that was agonal breathing is what was going on. And so when he wasn't responding and those sounds started being a little bit alarming, I called 911. And the dispatcher walked me through CPR, and I did CPR for 10 minutes. And then the paramedics arrived and took over and shocked him, I think, 5 times, and gave him a bunch of other drugs that you give in this kind of circumstance. And they got his heartbeat back before he left the house. And so that was great. But we still didn't know if he was going to survive, or if he did survive, if he would be himself or, have any new impairments or anything like that. So I didn't get to be with him in the hospital because it was right at the height of the COVID pandemic. The paramedics had come in full hazmat suits and hoods and shields and everything. And so I just didn't get to be there. And so I just sort of had to wait at home to hear about what was going on with him. But he had a whole bunch they ran all the tests that you would run, all the scans and blood work and I don't know, everything that they do. And there was nothing to indicate what caused it. They cooled his brain for 24 hours. And then when they woke him up from that, he was following commands and, slowly from there started showing more and more signs that he was still himself as he's always been. And so that was when we could finally breathe a sigh of relief that everything was going to be okay.
Well, that's great. Well, a shout out to the dispatcher for calmly walking you through. Had you had a chest compression only kind of drill or CPR drill exercise that you had ever done or rehearsed in high school, college, wherever, or was that the first?
I had taken a CPR training course for a part-time job in college, but it wasn't hands only at that time. It was still mouth to mouth and all of that. And it has been more years than I would like to admit since that happened. So, I was somewhat familiar with it, but I did not know that that's what he needed. The dispatcher was the one that realized that and walked me through what to do. And thankfully it's not that complicated of a maneuver.
Right.
It's just, I didn't know it was necessary. So, if she hadn't been there, I'm not sure that he would still be here.
Yeah. And well, you obviously did a good job. You can speak to whether there's been any impairment that resulted from the 10
Just
minutes.
what was already.
Jury's still out. We
Yeah.
don't know.
Yes, okay. It's still touch and go as to, do we blame those
You-
chest compressions?
Yeah, have you seen what I do on social media? You can make the argument. There's some.
I have. I mean, but so at first I wondered whether those compressions were fast enough and deep enough, and maybe there was a little bit of a hit that took place, but no, I think it's all there.
I was really worried about that, doing them though, because she wanted me, of course, to move him to the floor, and I couldn't. I'd had a cervical disc implant or replacement just a few months before, and you can't really tell very well, but he's over a foot taller than me and quite a bit heavier. And so I didn't think I could move him without hurting one or both of us, and so I had to do it on the bed. So I was very concerned about how that was going to work out. But
She didn't even break any of my ribs either.
No broken ribs, and I guess it was a firm mattress, so it all worked.
Worst thing I had were burns from the defibrillation.
Yeah, and I imagine that 10 minutes must have felt like forever.
Oh, it was so long. Yeah.
Until the first responders got there.
Yes,
So
I
what
kept
was
asking her, "Are they here yet? Are they here yet?"
Yeah, so Will, or should I call you Will, Dr. Flannery?
Will, you can call me Will.
Or King Glaucomflecken?
Will is
Please
fine.
no.
Okay. So Will, when you finally wake up, this had to be kind of like, what on earth happened to me? Because I'm assuming that was your first warning spell, your first sentinel event, as in your sentinel event. No warning, faints, collapses, nothing in your past story until Mother's Day night 3 years ago, and then the big thing happens.
Yep, exactly. I had no, I woke up. I was in the ICU, and really the first things I remember were my ICU nurse talking to me, telling me where I was, and also I remember talking to Kristen through FaceTime, and I remember her talking to me. I remember her tone of voice too. It was very like, kind of like matter of fact, like you're in the hospital. It was like clearly everybody was like, this guy is not all here just yet. Doesn't know where he is. It was very obvious, I think, to everyone. So they're trying to treat me just a little bit, trying to go easy on me and not giving me too much to process at one point.
Well, and what you might not remember is that probably was not the first time I had told you that.
Oh,
So.
Okay. Well, I guess that happened multiple times. So,
and having taken care of a lot of sudden cardiac arrest survivors, did you experience a frustration, if you will, during the first year of, some people describe it just sort of as fog, that their mental calculus, kind of math territory and stuff just didn't seem like it used to be, or did it, when it came back and the computer rebooted, were you basically back, or was there the fog thing?
So, I mean, Kristen can give you what she thinks, but I think once I got through like the first few days, it's certainly like when I left the hospital, because I was discharged how many days after the event? 3 days. So once I got home, I cognitively, I felt fine. Like, honestly, I felt I didn't have that feeling like I can't think properly, or I can't, hold a conversation, or I remember I had memory loss. Like, I couldn't remember certain things, but in the day to day, like, I felt like I could function just fine.
Now, while you were making eye contact with me, your wife was doing a horizontal thing like this when you were saying,
was I saying weird stuff?
No. You got to it after that. It was the memory issue.
The memory, yeah. I certainly had memory loss, but just the ability to function in my day-to-day life, I felt fine.
Yeah, he seemed like himself.
Yeah.
I
was tweeting. I was like posting on social media. So I was.
So that was probably one of your most creative episodes then, the first post cardiac arrest one, or?
I'm trying to remember what was my first video after the arrest.
I don't know about your video, but I remember the tweet. He tweeted, so I knew that he was awake. And this is maybe
because
like
I was
the
posting
second
on social
day.
media.
Well, no. I had known by the updates from the hospital that he was awake and was following commands. And so I think it was about that point, but I hadn't really gotten to talk to him yet. And then I saw a tweet that he said, "Boy, have I had a wild few days," or whatever. And that was when, I found out along with the rest of everybody else that he was going to be himself. I knew he was going to survive, but I didn't know yet if he was himself. So.
Right. And, for many of our sudden cardiac arrest survivors, after doing the drill, you said you were dismissed in 3 days, and whether it's 3 days or a week, we ultimately come in the room and say, hey, we figured it out. We know the why, and it's a heart condition called X, and we treat it this way. But in many, like you will, we do the drill and we turn every stone over we can, and we come back in the room and we say, we're going to call this IVF, which stands for idiopathic VF, or the idiots don't know what's going on, depending on your perspective.
Yeah.
How frustrating is it to do cardiac arrest and then have nobody be able to tell you the why?
Well, not only did you tell me that you couldn't figure it out, but you gave me a wearable defibrillator that I had to put on, and I had to wear this life vest for like
It was a couple weeks, I think.
Like 2 weeks, which was not something that I had ever envisioned that I'd be wearing, this electric bra thing.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. But honestly, I don't remember having a feeling like, man, I really wish you could figure out what happened to me. I don't know. It was just more like, I'm just glad that I get to go home.
Right.
And that was really the more predominant thought for me. And I'm glad that there's nothing, structurally wrong with my heart, and that my cardiac MRI was normal, and my genetic testing has all been pretty clean. And so and maybe it's just my personality. I don't think a whole lot about the fact that I don't have a cause. It's more like what would happen if it happened again, and not
it's kind of one
knowing.
of those silver linings, isn't it? Is often we find that when we do the entire drill and we can't find anything wrong, there's sort of the good news is that it almost never happens in anybody else who you're related to, as in your children.
Right.
And the second hit, or your defibrillator getting called into action to do it again, is actually quite uncommon. So in a weird way,
Yeah.
not finding the answer is a pretty good answer.
Yeah, my main thing was I was just really glad to hear that structurally my heart was fine.
Yeah.
Like that was a big relief to me.
What about you and the coexistence of your box, also known as the ICD? Some people, it doesn't faze them. They kind of have this peace of mind that they've got the life insurance installed. Other people, owning that device is emotionally traumatic. What has it been like for your experience?
I'm fine with it. It's my little buddy. I got a subcutaneous ICD. And so it just kind of sits kind of right up here close to my armpit. And I don't really think about it until my dog or my kids kind of punch me in just the right spot on accident, and I feel it there, or, because you can feel the wires too. So like I'm aware that it's there, but it's not cumbersome to me.
Yeah.
I absolutely don't mind having it. I'd be okay with having one for the rest of my life if I need to.
And I assume that you're one of those great stories where in almost 3 years now, the score has been no shocks, no complications.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's, when you're in that category, it's easier to like the buddy.
That's true.
Yes.
Than for some of those where, since the device has been made by men and women, it doesn't always work correctly. And so I guess that changes it. But I guess easy street for you. But for you, Kristen, many times the sudden cardiac arrest survivor, they get along fine because they didn't go through it. They were just kind of there, but you went through it. Did you have PTSD, post-traumatic stress or distress? Do you have it? Do you think of that night? What kind of is the recovery for the rescuer or the witness or the one who did the resuscitation?
Yeah, I definitely experienced that fog you were talking about. I had a lot of trouble being able to function cognitively after that. If it wasn't anything about just the practical day-to-day things, I just couldn't wrap my brain around anything. I just couldn't focus on anything long enough to process it. Nothing anyone was talking about seemed important. It all was just kind of in one ear and out the other. And I couldn't really make conversation very well either. I could talk about what needed to be done or what had happened, but it was just, it's a weird little thing that happens when you go through trauma. You kind of retreat into this place somewhere in your mind. I called it the quiet place because of that difficulty with language. And it wasn't until I found other people's words that resonated with my experience in various ways. Once I had that language to be able to sort of frame and name and label my experience, then I was, I got my language back. But yeah, it was definitely traumatic. I don't know that I had PTSD. I never was diagnosed. I didn't never see a psychologist or anything. I certainly had, post-traumatic stress, absolutely. And I've tried to turn that into post-traumatic growth. But I don't know if it was ever a disorder, but I certainly do have, flashbacks still. I certain triggers will take me right back to that feeling of that night. But for the most part, things are pretty good.
Yeah, I think for the families out there where they are the spouse or the mom and dad of a child, I mean, just yesterday, two of my patients, a great kid, got his first appropriate ICD shock in 10 years since his cardiac arrest from 10 years ago. And then another family, a beautiful girl with type 3 long QT syndrome, missed a couple of doses of her medicine and got collapsed and got her ICD rescue shock. And then you kind of wonder if that sort of reactivates everything and makes things fragile again when you thought things were maybe on cruise control. So strategies that you had to sort of do your post-traumatic growth and leave the stress behind, anything that you would have to encourage those out there who might still be going through it?
Yeah, first I would say that's normal, and take your time. And there's no rush. There's no way to rush getting through that. It's just going to take time. But also trying to find other people's experience that are similar to yours in some way, or that whatever it is that you're going back to in your mind, if you could find information about that to sort of help your brain finish processing all of that, I think that would be great. There's a lay responder resource guide by a paramedic in Canada called Paul Snobelin, and he works for the region of Peel, and they've made it publicly available. And that is always what I recommend people try to find as soon as they can after the event. It would be great if something like that were handed out to everyone at the scene at the time. But it has a lot of the information in it that if you're not trained in a medical field in some way, you just don't know, and you sit there and you think about it. Just keep so a lot of the things that you see and that you hear or feel are not anything you've experienced before, and they're really scary and traumatic. And so to have something explained to you why all these various things happened and what that meant for the person, and it also tries to connect people with resources for themselves. Now what about me? Am I going to be okay?
Right.
If the person,
I'm wondering, as a medical professional and an ophthalmologist, I'm guessing ophthalmologist from Glaucomflecken. I don't know, just a guess.
yes.
But I imagine since you chose that career path, you probably never thought you would have a direct reconnect to the heart.
I was hoping I wasn't going to have to.
Yeah. So how did you then decide? So some survivors and the families, they just kind of get back on the horse and life is as it was the day before Mother's Day. Others say, you know what, I got to now get involved in American Heart Association and SADS Foundation and whatever, in some capacity of advocacy, awareness. What made the most sense for you and what you wanted to do post cardiac arrest?
Well, a lot of when talking about it's affected my approach to life and work in a couple different ways. So, with my social media presence and all the comedy and stuff that I'm doing, when I first started doing all that, it was like strictly jokes, just, making fun of specialties and all this stuff. And then some of the experiences I had throughout this whole process that gave me a different perspective, namely dealing with the healthcare system, health insurance, greed, all this stuff that's prevalent in our system here. I started to making more content, still comedic content, but also having that underlying thread of kind of exposing some of these things to other healthcare professionals, but also the general public. So doing like a skit about prior authorizations where it's funny, but also like lots of truth to it. And I think that helped to reach a lot of people. And I realized that can actually itself be a form of advocacy, because of the platform I had and continue to grow over time. And so I think that's where a lot of my advocacy work has been focused, in the form of comedy, and also speaking and doing some of the stuff that we're doing right now.
Right.
And so it's fun to be able to combine like this passion I have for making people laugh and for humor, and while also helping to educate people on certain things and kind of channeling this terrible thing that happened, channeling some of the lessons I've learned into and combining it all.
I'm curious what started it, the comedy part of your life. Was that right there from medical school and residency, or where was?
I was in high school. I started, I've always been a class clown, believe it or not. And so a friend of mine, the best man at my wedding, best friend of mine, he's so funny. And he started doing stand-up comedy when he was in high school, and I was a year behind him. And so I was like, hey, I want to try that. And so I went with him. We would go to the comedy club. We were like 17, 18 years old in Houston, Texas. And I wasn't very good, but nobody really is when they first start doing stand-up. But I kept at it, and it was a fun hobby. I was always funny with my friends. And so, I got better and better at it over time, but, went the route of med school but kept doing comedy as a hobby, and eventually transitioned into doing like social media stuff because, life as a med school resident, physician. I mean, I have time as an ophthalmologist now, thank goodness. But it does, my schedule now affords me the ability to really cultivate this side of me.
Yeah, and I suspect, Kristen, and maybe for both of you, 6 weeks ago, Monday Night Football and the collapse, was that a trigger when you witnessed what you saw happen to Mr. Hamlin, and did that bring back memories of your own situation, or I was just curious for our survivors out there, when they see something in prime time like that, what kind of goes through your heart and your mind?
Yeah, so I was watching that game, and they showed the replay. This is like right when it happened. No one really knew exactly what was going on. All the players were huddled around, and they showed a replay of when he fell, and I like knew immediately. I was like, this that he had a cardiac arrest. Like, it just, it just had that look of someone getting hit. I don't, obviously we didn't know like exactly what caused it, but he just collapsed. And then you saw the reactions of all the teammates, all the players who were crying and just breaking down. And it just, yeah, it brought back a lot of feelings for me of thinking about Kristen. Um, and so it's for a while, for a good week or so. I was, and anytime you look on social media anywhere, you were hearing about it too. So it's like it's this constant conversation surrounding it, which ultimately is a good thing, right? It brought a lot of awareness to
Right.
these issues. But yeah, it was a bit triggering. I don't know what it was like for you. I mean,
Yeah,
to
the
hear about it.
collapse itself wasn't triggering for me because I didn't
You didn't watch
see
it.
he
Yeah.
didn't collapse. He was already
I
laying
think I
in
told
bed.
you about it later.
Oh yeah, but I saw the replays and things,
Yeah.
and it didn't bother me to see that part. But what got me was the reaction of everybody else, because I know exactly what they were seeing, and I know what that feels like. And what my biggest trigger is now is actually seeing CPR performed, even if it's a mannequin. And that can be a little tricky as an advocate, right? But
Right.
yeah, that's the real trigger for
Right.
me. So I was really glad that a lot of the conversation nationally was around the other players and the people that were there at the stadium and witnessed it, and the people that performed CPR on him. I was really encouraged to see that was included in the conversation this time,
Right.
because I feel like that's typically overlooked.
I'm curious for both of you, and I was thinking, Will, when you said how your comedy has turned a bit to edgy satire or commentary on the healthcare system and frustration points. As a survivor and Kristen as the rescuer, and now directly participating in awareness, what things are you hoping to see happen from American Heart Association or the other entities that are directly responsible for awareness, and us at SADS Foundation, that you think need to happen better, aren't happening, frustrations, like, let's get on this, what's going on here? What, as the direct, this is real world for you and not theoretical, what say you two as to what we need to be doing better sooner?
Boy, I could talk to you for a whole other hour on that topic alone. I have been a little discouraged to learn that the space is pretty fractured. And because of that and limited resources, there's a lot of politics and kind of not cruel or anything, but a little bit of infighting, because anytime there's scarce resources, there's competition for those things. And I think that's had a detrimental effect on the space as a whole. I would love to see the American Heart Association in particular recognize the role of co-survivors and continue to build out resources and recommendations for survivors and co-survivors. So I'm happy to see, the sixth link in the chain now has been added, that's surviving a cardiac arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been this prevailing thought that, once you're discharged from the hospital, you're cured, go home, be happy, you're still alive. And that is certainly part of it. But that diminishes the actual experience that you have after that. It's not that simple. And there's a lot that happens as a survivor and a co-survivor that people, need help with and need some follow-up with. I would love to see protocols be, survivor focused and trauma informed, rather than strictly treating the medical conditions. That's obviously very important. And in some ways, it's a sign of a good problem, right? Because there just didn't used to be survivors.
Right.
So thankfully, there are, because of all of the work for, awareness and CPR and AEDs and all of that. And that's great. And that work should continue. But for a lot of organizations, it stops there. And I think it needs to go further and add in support and resources for survivors and co-survivors and lay responders.
Wow. Well said. Will, anything from your vantage point?
Yeah, affordable AEDs, widespread, affordable. Get them in people's homes. Have one on every street, and have everybody in that street know where the AED is. That kind of thing.
Right.
Because
we were talking at the opening of making it very, very hard to die suddenly in a community because there's a sudden death safety net that's robust and can be activated. Yeah.
Yeah, because the station that responded to us is less than a mile
and
from
it took
our
10
house.
minutes for them to get to me.
So yeah, now we have an AED in our home, but I sure wish that there would have been one close by that night. Yeah.
Right. Well, appreciate the two of you so much. Appreciate your story. So glad it is a beautiful story and not a tragic one. And we think of the families who are watching, some of them, their story isn't so good. And I think I'll share with you a note from Lene, and she wants to thank you. Thank you to Dr. and Mrs. Glaucomflecken. Thank you for sharing your story. I love the combination of humor and healthcare. We lost our sweet daughter, Rebecca, in 2003. And our family have developed a dark sense of humor, but it keeps us going. And so for families like Lene's, and Lene, I know you and I love you and your family and your daughter, Ellie. And so I do think of those families where just hearing about this might have a deep sense of loss again for not having a successful outcome. But the good news is when we make diagnoses of these sudden death predisposing genetic heart conditions, a tragedy subsequently almost never, ever, ever happens. And the families and the patient, they get to live very, very large lives. They live and thrive, just like you and your family get to continue to live and thrive. So appreciate you two, appreciate what you're doing for your role of awareness and advocacy, and also for your interest in partnering with us at the SADS Foundation. Maybe we can be one of those unfractured advocacy organizations that helps spread the word. So
and I would say too to those families like Lene's that, if it feels right to you, consider yourself a survivor of cardiac arrest. What do we say when in an obituary, right? We say they are survived by. And it very much happens to the family as well. And you have survived and continued to live your lives. And those people deserve to be supported and included in the conversation as well.
Well, great. Look forward to seeing you again. And Dr. Flannery, I can't wait to see you as a keynote speaker in one of our cardiology conferences. I'll be there listening, and we'll have to share a Kodak moment together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Well, best wishes to you and to all of you out there. Join us again in 2 weeks for SADS Live number 112. I'll be taking your questions. Your questions are amazing. Hopefully the answers will do justice to those questions. Again, join us throughout the rest of Heart Month here, this month of February. Get involved, spread the word, participate, donate if you can. www.sads.org. Until next time, blessings to all of you.